Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So I want to start out this video with a look at the TNX, the 10-year Treasury yields. I think something pretty important and kind of scary is potentially developing. It's something we need to keep our eye on, and I want to go through it in detail. And what I'm going to look at in multiple time frames, looking at longer term time frames, I want to go through how we complement the ADX with the RSI and the MACD. All right, so once I get done with that, we'll go through the market and then we'll look at the individual stock requests that came through. All right, so I'm looking at the 10-year Treasury yields, the TNX on Stockcharts. All right, and I've altered the time frame somewhat. I've got the quarterly in the bottom left. I've got a monthly in the bottom right, weekly upper right, and then another monthly up here. Usually I have these two are the same. And I like to look at two things with relationship. So this is kind of like the main time frame we're looking at in this instance because we're looking at a longer term trend. All right. I like to look at the momentum conditions using MACD and ADX, but I also like to look at what's taking place on the RSIs based on the 20 RSI and the 5 RSI. All right. So I like to use the RSIs as a complement to what I'm seeing in the, especially in the ADX. So the way I use these indicators is I've got the ADX set up for, it's telling me what to expect. What are we looking to get out of this? Is it a low trend environment? Is it a strong trend environment? Is it something that looks like it's going to bounce around and not do a whole lot and I could possibly get chopped up? Or does it look like a really strong trend I need to look to buy a pullback in? So I use the ADX in multiple time frames to really help zero in on which patterns have the strongest trends and which ones are maybe coiling or setting up for a breakout. But after that, I'm pretty much focused on MACD and RSI to help with timing. All right. Now, there's a couple things that MACD does that's really nice is that if it stays above the zero line during a correction, so we make a move up and then this consolidates back. And if you notice this, we were pretty far from the zero line here on MACD, and it's been working its way back in a really orderly manner, not showing a whole lot of steepness to the decline. It's not a vertical decline. It's more of a really orderly sideways pattern. So that sort of tells me the selling pressure is not that strong. And I have that confirmation from what I'm seeing in the ADX pattern. But if you notice on an RSI basis, we were up at the 20 low. RSI 20 was up around 50. All right. And then it was up around 70. And then it pulled back and it made another test of 70 and kind of made a little lower high and then made another lower high and now has worked its way back down. And so it's gotten itself closer to the 50 mark. It's sort of worked off the overbought condition and come back more to a neutral area. And now on the last couple pullbacks, we're showing the RSI 5 coming down under the 50 mark and turning back up 2 times now. Actually, it's been 3. But when this is still declining, I'm a little less interested. Now, RSI 20 is basically, it made a higher low. Now we're starting to get this feel that, you know, there's probably not a significant amount of downside. Now, I think what's entirely possible is that we could spend more time channeling sideways, and this will just be kind of an early signal, and we might get a few more before it's ready. Because the quarterly 18 is down here, and I think it might need a little bit more time to catch up a little bit. All right, so I wanted to just kind of point out that I like to use the RSIs to help me with the timing along with MACD, and ADX is more of a tool that I'm using to kind of discern how strong is the trend. Is this a stock or market that I should be interested in? Are we getting confirmation in the trend of momentum characteristics that we want? So when I look at this, and the reason why I think this is just downright scary is look at what's taken place on the quarterly. This goes back to 1980. It's really nice having all this history on the Stockcharts program. So we've got this lower highs and lower lows. It's working its way down. The 18 quarter line has been below the 40 quarter line, both simple moving averages, since 1985. All right, maybe 86. And They stayed below until well, actually it was last year. We turned back to the upside. And if you notice the way it did it, this is what scares me more than anything. It's the way it did it. We went from a new low. So if we look at this as a swing chart, we went from a new low to a new high, okay? And really kind of qualifies as a pullback and then a turn back to the upside. So to me, you've gotten some pretty bullish characteristics in the swing chart. Number one. Number two, the 18 is now above the 40 and both lines are rising. That is a confirmed uptrend, all right, in my world anyway. So I've got price action and the moving averages sort of confirming and giving me the same positive feedback that things are shifting. Look at what the MACD is doing for the first time in ages. Same area in the mid 1980s, it had been broke below the zero line, and now it crossed back above. And more important to me, it's not like it's rolling over. It's more of a sideways pattern. You notice how prices hit 5, and it's just kind of coiling or working sideways rather than having a really sharp decline. Now, the kicker here is the ADX line. If you notice, we had really strong ADX based on the buyers. That's where the green is on top, red's below, and green is on top. All right, so we can see that here. From this point on, all the way through here, all the way through this low, we had red on top, red on top, red on top, red on top. So all these moves where the ADX is showing strength is based on sellers. Even this one, which was just a minor move above 25, was still based on the sellers, and that is actually another tip-off that things we should be looking for a reversal, because this really wasn't all that strong. So we get a new low in price, and the ADX actually diverges off that and then gets weaker, and then we get the real sign of strength to the upside based on the buyers. So all of these characteristics are suggesting that something kind of meaningful has started. Now, again, the biggest thing that scares me is the fact that this is going sideways and not pulling back. If we got this to pull back, then we could just say, okay, 5's a top, and we're going to form a range for a while. I mean, it could be years, right? But what this is suggesting is that we're kind of working sideways it's almost like water building on a dam. When you do this, you show strength to the upside, a lot of momentum, powerful, strong characteristics, and then you work sideways like this. I'm sort of thinking that ultimately we're going to break through this 5 level. All right. Now, if we wait, if we look at this on a quarterly basis, it could be another couple quarters before that kicks in. Might be early next year or something like that. Maybe sometime next year. But my point is that I think if we get through that, look at how important this 5 level has been. If we break through that, then I think we need to be concerned, and this will have a material impact on the stock market if this thing starts to trend to the upside. If we get serious movement to the upside, that would really, it's not the sign we want to be seeing. So I'm watching this probably closer than anything. Of all of the non-stock market indicators, looking for the relationships, intermarket relationships, this is the one that has me the most interested in watching what's going to take place here, because you can just see how we've been working our way lower, and now all of a sudden things are starting to shift. And when that happens, we need to be prepared for what takes place if we do break through 5 and if there's extension to the upside. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on this page right now. You can see at the top, I've got my advanced trend and momentum courses. There's 3 different courses now. I've individually priced them, or you can buy them as a bundle, and they are lifetime access now. So I changed that. It's not year to year. Okay. And then we have the individual package. I have about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video, weekly video for that package that covers a lot of details into what I'm seeing for the week. So if you have an interest, go ahead and take a look. Also, the book is on the book tab. You can go if this is a good place to start if you're new to my methodology. My comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own research before making any investments. All right, so before I leave this setup I have in the TNX, I do want to mention one more thing. I just want to make sure I follow up and give a pretty clear outline of what I'm looking at with ADX, MACD, and RSI. So the ADX for me is used as a way of shrinking my list down. I'm looking at monthly, weekly, and daily ADX to determine which stocks or markets I'm interested in. All right. And I'm going to put them into two buckets. One bucket are strong ones that I'm looking for a pullback in, and the others are ones that have been in a low ADX condition and I'm looking for a breakout pattern. But I am doing that almost exclusively by looking at the ADX. So it really helps for me to refine my list so I can focus on which stocks have the best opportunity to do something meaningful. Once I've got that list, then I'm going to look at MACD for signals and I'm looking for RSI for signals. Both of them can provide me with timing tools to get me in at the right time. I don't necessarily use the ADX that way. It could be used that way if you take a hard look at the DI lines. We can do some of that. And I'm not saying I don't at all, but I'm mostly focused on the MACD and the RSIs for my signals. Now, I'm using them as a complement to the moving averages. So I don't use the MACD and the RSI by themselves. I'm seeing how price structure is setting up relative to the moving averages, and then based on that, then I get my signals off the MACD and the RSI. All right, a lot of this is covered obviously in the course. It's pretty extensive, but that I wanted to make sure I made that pretty clear. All right, let's move on. I want to talk about the QQQ. Now, so there's two reasons why I do the Qs instead of the spiders on this weekly show. Is that I do, for my channel, Invest Like a Pro, on Friday mornings, I do an update for the market. I go through all the market conditions and I use the spider in multiple time frames and I go through that. So again, that's Invest Like a Pro. The channel that's called @JoeRabil is actually not mine. It's someone who's impersonating me, and I'm trying to actually get YouTube to get rid of it. But I want to make sure you know, if you want to find out more information about what I'm doing, you go to Invest Like a Pro. 7977 is the letters for the channel. All right, so let's just look at this, what's developing in the QQQ. So you get this move to the upside, and it's made a pretty extensive move. I want to look at this on a daily chart. I mean, we can see sort of a V-bottom look to the weekly, right? And a really nice reversal on the monthly. But I want to focus in on the daily for a second, because we've made a pretty extensive move to the upside, and this looks just like the S&P. What I don't like about what is going on here is we can't make a new high in the DI line. It just isn't breaking out. MACD is also not making a new high. So we've gone to new highs here, and we're starting to show signs that maybe it's getting a little tired. We've made a massive move off the low on a daily chart with several swings and several ups, pullbacks along the way, and ADX has not been able to get above 25. So be careful if this thing tries to break out and then the ADX kicks in. I would view that almost like a climax if it plays out that way. We still have this resistance overhead, right? Now, I think based on the way this is set up, it's almost, these highs act like a magnet. I wouldn't be surprised if we go to a new high or something like that at this point before we pull back on this index. But I would just tell you that this is kind of a disturbing signal, both the MACD and the DI lines, and the fact that the ADX can't get above 25, despite the fact that this index has gone from almost 400 up to 535. All right, so you need to be you have to be conscious of this. What I've been saying to my subscribers is that I would be more stock focused than index focused, but we do want to be aware of what the markets are doing, the general market's doing, because we're in a high volatility environment and we're coming up against the highs without having a retracement along the way. I mean, you can see on the swing chart, we have not had a pullback. So, we got to be a little bit more careful in that regard. All right, let's look at the IWM. I think is a little worse because we're rallying up into resistance after being a weak performer and continuing to be a weak performer, starting to show a little bit of life on an RS basis, but we need to get back through this moving average and have the moving average actually turn to the upside before we can have a lot of confidence that this is ready to do anything meaningful. All right. All right, let's start going through some of the requests that came through. So this VNET, I think, this was kind of a violent move to the downside, and now we have the 18-week rolling over. I see that we're pulling back on the monthly, right? But look at the volume pattern. You see the big volume that went in and then all the volume, the heavy volume that came out. I think this is going to take a little time to recover, and I wouldn't do anything below this 18-week line. I wouldn't have an interest in really doing anything with it as long as it stays below that line. All right, so Box is trying to break out here. Did it via a gap. And so now we kind of want to see how this handles this breakout area around 35. So we make this move to the upside on a violent move gap-wise. See how it can handle the 18-day. See how it can handle this breakout level. I think ideally, just looking at this pattern, I really would not mind seeing the RSI come back and give a little, a pretty more definitive buy signal. If this RSI 5 can come down under 50 and RSI 20 stay above, then we can look for a turn back to the upside, and I think that would be a pretty good pattern if it developed that way. The relative strength is actually making a breakout here. Volume pattern is good. The pullback on the volume has been pretty good. I think this is a good one to watch. We just need a trigger to kick in. Okay, Intel. So if you look at the way this is played out, we had this move to the upside. And really what I'm looking for is a bit of a breakout above this high here. If we can get back above 22.5, 22 3/4, then to me, that would be a sign that on a trading basis, maybe you could work up into the next level, which would be about 26, 26.5. You can see. So I want to use the higher time frames to tell me how much room I have if I'm going to play this as a trade. So if I'm going to trade it, I know that I pretty much have to be out by here because the declining 18-month is telling me that there's resistance overhead. All right, so be aware of that if you're going to do this type of trading. Micron is actually starting to come on. I like the fact that this has turned up and made a really strong move. It was below all these lows and now it's above all these highs. So we've done a pretty big reversal from a new low to a new high. Now we need a pullback. Definitely a stock to be watching, but I think we need a couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks to really get that set up in place. Okay, so PDYN. We got a decent amount of stocks that are kind of doing this. So they make this move up, they rally up to the 40-month, and then they pull back to a rising 18-month. All right, the MACD pattern doesn't look bad. There's still some room to the zero line, even if this is just a trade. But I do like the look of the way this pulled back. All right, so from that standpoint, I'm not too bad with this. We had a pretty strong move to the upside with strong ADX, and then we've corrected back. And green stayed on top of red throughout. MACD held the zero line throughout. But I wouldn't, because of the way this was violent and the way that it pulled back, it was too violent for me. I wouldn't take a trend line break, but I would be looking for the next pullback while the 18 on the weekly chart is cupping around. If I got a pullback that held, then I would have a lot more interest in this. So something to be on the lookout for is watching for a 2 to 3 bar pause or pullback on the weekly chart while this turns to the upside. All right. QSI, sort of a similar situation, although not quite as strong on the monthly. We have this sort of pattern where we had a big, strong move. ADX is strong, but the MACD overran the zero line here. And I think this needs a little bit more time. I want to see the 18 weeks start to cupping to the upside. I want to see it rallying. Right now it's still declining. If we can get that to turn up, then I think this can look a lot more attractive, especially if it can get back up through $2. SCCO. So let's look at this with all the time frames up. I think this is interesting. Copper seems like it's starting to come back into vogue. Now, if I look at these tops here, top, right? $80 is really important. Look at how the correction found support right at $80. All right. We also made a higher low versus this prior bottom. Yet this came down, and it's probably making more like a double bottom. But overall, I think this looks pretty interesting because the 18-month is still rising. Now, the fact that it came down as far as it did means we're probably not going straight up. We're going to probably bounce around a little bit. And what I'd really like to see is this break the downtrend line on the weekly chart and then look for a pullback, an orderly pullback. So 100 mark is a big key level. I think if we can get through that with some strength, then you could look to play the next pullback. I think that's how I would handle this. It's definitely an area to be on the lookout for based on the recent action. Thanks for watching today. If you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com or just put them in the comment area below. Also, if you want to learn more about these techniques, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.